Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. This is our show for Tuesday, January 10th. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornital, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker once again on the podcast, on the YouTube channel as well. We encourage folks to check out the YouTube channel if you haven't already, if that's not in your repertoire. We're going to be doing more and more here, especially when it comes to looking at these Triple Crown prep races, as it were. I'm joined today, as I was last week, as I am so often, by In the Money Media's own Nick Tammaro. Nick, how are things?
Doing great, Pete. Ready for another week to end. I guess it did. So better to have been ready and ready for another to get started. Always fun looking back.
It's an interesting time of year. You know, we're starting to see not just these prep races, not just these points races, some of which we're going to be talking about, but also some interesting maidens and allowances. We'll be talking about one of those a little bit later in the show, starting to look ahead to the Pegasus at the end of the month. I booked my trip. Have you been to the Pegasus Live? It's one of the big race days, largely because of the NHC. I've never been to, but I'm looking forward to making my maiden voyage.
I was at the 2019 Pegasus, the City of Light Pegasus. I finished ninth in the Pegasus World Championship betting challenge that year, and yeah, it was fun. The weather was terrible, but we ate good and had a lot of fun.
That's right. I remember that year. I covered that from the Sky Studios in London. That was my excuse for missing that one. But no excuses this year. Looking forward to getting there. We'll talk a little bit about Gulfstream racing, and we'll reflect on the coast-to-coast bets as well later on. But as promised, let's talk about some Derby preps. And let's start in New York with a race that admittedly hasn't had that much impact on the Triple Crown races in the last several years, but the Jerome Stakes going a mile at Aqueduct, won as you predicted in your column on inthemoneypodcast.com by Lugan Knight, who earns a figure of 85. What were your thoughts on this performance?
I'll tell you, I thought he was really game. There's no doubt about it. And, you know, afterwards, I kind of mocked Jose Lezcano a little bit. And I put full disclosure, I'm a big Jose Lezcano fan. But this is the second straight race on Arctic Arrogance. He took a big peek back at the quarter pole and then found a way to lose. So I don't know if maybe he is overrating Arctic Arrogance. I wonder maybe if Arctic Arrogance is a little distance limited. I don't know. I'd like to think that he just got beat by a slightly better horse in each of his last two starts. And, you know, I don't know, Pete. I thought around the far turn that Arctic Arrogance was going to take Lugan Knight whenever he wanted. And the fact that he just kept on finding, I thought was awfully compelling. You know, he's obviously has to take a step forward in order to be a major Derby Trail contender, but there's no doubt he's got some talent. And I guess the biggest takeaway, victory formation's pretty darn good because he beat this horse somewhat easily at Churchill last time.
Yes, that's right. Victory Formation, who is on most everybody's Derby list at this point. Definitely a form boost there. Let's start with Lugan Knight. He earns the 85, wire-to-wire fashion. I agree. Looked dead to rights, turning for home. I screwed this one up in the betting. Like you, this was the horse that I liked on paper. And it was one of those things where a combination of hearing the Mike McCarthy quotes, doubting how far he wanted to go, hearing Maggie Wolfendale say similar in the paddock, and just my own visual impression. Lugan Knight looked kind of slight and sprinty looking. I mean, this is a horse who, if he's really better going shorter, I mean, he might eventually be really, really good. And seems like a horse that has some scope to like grow a bit. Given how early we are in the 3-year-old year. So I guess my fear about him going forward is still unclear how far he wants to go. But, you know, people get this stuff wrong all the time, including trainers and owners. So we'll see about that. Arctic Arrogance, I feel like, I don't think it was the distance. I mean, it acted okay going farther before. Right. I don't know if this isn't a case of maybe you were right about the ride. This might be the old JK thing about a horse that's actually better, maybe trying to be a little more aggressive, go a little bit faster, and I did hear Linda Rice mention this possibility in a post-race interview, one that maybe needs blinkers, maybe just a horse that at this point has a little bit of that pack animal mentality, gets there, feels like he's done enough. I don't know, some combination of a more aggressive ride and blinkers. I wouldn't be giving up on Arctic Arrogance just yet. I think this is a talented horse who can be, you know, heard from in his division at least.
Yeah, too talented a horse to give up on just yet. Showed too much as a 2-year-old, quite honestly, and then validated it in his first start at 3. So I like the blinker idea. You know, you feel like a horse that he did go down kind of with just a whimper, because once Lugan Knight really asserted his superiority, he didn't fight back all that much. yeah, he might be a horse that needs to be kept to his task a little bit more clearly, and that could be really achieved with the addition of blinkers. So no doubt about it. In a way, they're kind of playing with house money with Arctic Arrogance because there's so much money out there for New York breds that if he's good enough to be on the Derby Trail, which at least at this point there's no denying that he is. There's still some great objectives for him down the line. He's a horse who should have a really good 23.
Yeah, I think that sounds like the correct assessment of those runners. And with Lugan Knight, we'll see. We'll see what they decide to do. It sounded like they were gonna stay local and maybe look to stay at the one turn.
Withers.
Yeah. No, I think. Yeah, I is there a spot in between that's going shorter? Because it's not. I do not think they want to go the mile and an eighth of the Withers. But I thought there was a target between now and the Gotham, but I'm spacing.
Might be New York breds.
I'll dig and see what I can find from those post race interviews. The info is out there on that one. In the meantime, let's head west and talk about the Sham from Saturday, which was won by not the other Baffert, but the other Baffert. Baffert has 3 in the field of 5, and it's Reincarnate, a horse who, from the way he's been campaigned, from the way he's been talked about, is a horse that was supposed to need more than a mile to show his best. This buyer figure came back fast, Nick, 95, and he earned it. This was not what looked like a speed favoring flow, and turned away 2 of his more fancied stablemates. How good do you think Reincarnate is? How surprised were you by this result?
I was a little surprised. I think he might be relatively solid. There have been times on the Derby Trail in recent years where Baffert horses stepped up with big efforts, especially ones that, are kind of coming into their own a little bit more slowly. It's kind of funny. I mean, it makes me think of Collected when I look at his PPs, and I think, boy, how the heck did Bob Baffert run an eventual graded stake winning dirt horse on the turf? Not once, but twice. And it just doesn't happen very often. And I wonder if maybe, part of the goal here, and I touched on this actually in my preview with Scott Shapiro for Twin Spires, that you had a couple of Bafferts in here that looked like they might be need the lead types. And Newgate was one of them, National Treasure to an extent as well. And, maybe the experiment sort of went right but wrong, right, in the sense that we found out that Reincarnate is good enough to win a race like this. And we also found out the National Treasure and Newgate can't really rate. So, it's an interesting quandary from a handicapping perspective, especially because, as you said, I mean, he got a very good buyer speed figure and really doesn't have to do much more than that to be considered a pretty solid horse on the trail. I'll tell you, I started to try and research a little bit more about him after he won, get a better sense of what he might be. They paid $775,000 for this horse. His pedigree absolutely stinks. I mean, the dam side is brutal. And it's one slow horse after another. So he is obviously a very, very good looking horse. And then, I mean, I know that as I've heard certain people say, you can't put a saddle on a pedigree. And so obviously the people who saw the physicality thought a lot of him. And this group's been incredibly successful with 3-year-olds. So hats off to him for buying into a good magic that obviously has a lot of ability. So, the concern I have, Pete, without filibustering you too much, is that a lot of these types of horses are a race-to-race proposition. And, Baffert has so many good 3-year-olds that we might see somebody else jump up in the San Felipe. We might see somebody else in the Bob Lewis. We could see somebody different yet again in the Santa Anita Derby. So, I know that we're going to see Faustin again pretty soon. We're going to see Arabian Night at some point. It's an embarrassment of riches, as you'd expect.
Yeah, I mean, when you saw the probables for this race, it wasn't just 3 Bafferts originally listed. There were like
8. It was like 47.
So we'll see where everybody else goes. Few thoughts to piggyback, one positive, one negative. I'll speak out of both sides of my mouth. We'll start on the positive side. I see the Baffert debuting a mile in the summer, and I think it's one of his slower horses who he thinks is more of a stayer. And his quotes back that up. He said something to the effect of that he pegged Reincarnate as his Belmont horse from a long way back and was surprised he was fast enough to do that. With that in mind, this is a horse with scope for improvement. Here's the bad thing. I know the figure came back in 95, which certainly would stamp him as a serious contender, but I don't know, in the history of your life, when you have a 5-horse race and there's 3 on the wire, is that good form or bad form?
It's not encouraging. right? It's better that it came back fast, right? It's
Yeah.
one thing if it had been that way and it was a 78. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think we'd be. I think we'd be done already. But yeah, it's a concern, right? It's a concern, and you're also, even though he's been to the post now 4 times, 5 times, you're dealing with a horse that, all things considered, I mean, he doesn't really have very much exposed form. So it's only his third dirt start, so he's still got a little room to move forward. National Treasure hasn't been around all that long either. So yeah, I mean, you're going to see these horses get better or worse very quickly, and at least it's not. It doesn't seem to me at this point like a scenario where we saw Messier in last year, where he ran off the screen in the Bob Lewis, and we subsequently realized that that was a huge gold rail. So it didn't look that way. It didn't feel that way on Sunday at Santa Anita. But again, I mean, you're going to look for every reason to poke holes in Reincarnate between now and his next start.
Yeah, I think that's about right. We'll see how it all turns out following that out there. There was a 3-year-old filly action in the Santa Ynez. I'll just very quickly touch on it. That was a race that changed when Justique came out. Ice dancing for Mandela gets the job done. But I mean, these are figures that wouldn't win a maiden 2-year-old race at Saratoga. We've seen this with the 3-year-old fillies out of California the last few years. Now, some of them have run well on the national stage as the years gone on, but the 74 figure certainly doesn't scream Kentucky Oaks to anybody. Did you see anything in there? Any horses you were interested in betting next time, or anything to piggyback off that thought on ice dancing?
No, nothing really to add. I'm of the opinion that the Justique figure from the Desi Arnaz is also too high, and that Parody and Hunting Coco backed that up. So I thought she was. I'm looking to bet against Justique at any opportunity moving forward, just because she's all sizzle and no steak at this point, right? I mean, she's all hype, and we need to see that backed up pretty quickly, especially around 2 turns. If there was going to be a race where she was going to be dangerous, this was it. And I mean, unfortunately, she had a fever, so hopefully we'll see her back pretty quickly in the next step along the Kentucky Oaks Trail out west. But as you said, I mean, these horses have a bad case in the slows right now. I mean, they are not improving, and you'd like to see a horse get a little bit better than a mid-70s fig first out as a 3-year-old.
Yeah, we'll see what happens as that division continues to truck on out there. One could step up at any time, I suppose. You were right, by the way, about the target for Lugan Night. It sounded like wait for the Gotham was going to be the plan there, at least according to the Blood Horse article that I pulled. We'll see what they decide to do. I mean, another impressive win. I mean, you almost have to think about. I mean, you gotta go long in the wood at that point and at least try to see what you have. So but I admire the approach they're taking, and they don't want to overmatch their horse, and maybe they think that little more time between the starts too will give some room to mature physically, and maybe this is a horse that in time will be able to go a bit farther. I mean, on pedigree, it's not crazy that he could go a little bit longer, and certainly has been a very game performer. Let's talk about one more 3-year-old race before we head out into the wider world of racing. There was this very interesting 3-year-old allowance race on Sunday that was part of the cross country bet, and I thought that Rudder's Men was ready for the close up. That's not the way that one turned out. In the end, it was Cyclone Mischief, a horse who Dale Romans had spoken positively about when we had him on the show last year. This horse beat a good field by 5 3/4, just absolutely put the wood to Litigate and the rest. And it came back a 90. So no joke here going a mile for Cyclone Mischief. Did you see this coming at all? The horse was 5.5 to 1. So not exactly at the top of the market, but hardly a rank outsider either.
Yeah, I mean, I think I expected him to run well. I thought his maiden win was really good, and I think there was a lot of deserved fanfare for him after his maiden win. He handled that field very, very nicely. And so you knew there was upside. You knew there was going to be reason to believe that he could be a competent 3-year-old pretty much wherever he landed. Rudder's Men and Litigate were both worthy of a lot of support here. Mr. Ripple also got a lot of money for Sappy Joseph. And so you anticipated it being kind of a showdown amongst those horses. But Rudder's Men obviously has distance limitations. He also is totally rank and unable to really rate whatsoever. Mr. Ripple, though, was pretty darn close to him early, and he beat him by almost 7 lengths. So I don't think we didn't get the Rudder's Men that we saw in debut at Aqueduct, but that's neither here nor there, because Cyclone Mischief was very good. He rated very comfortably behind horses, came through and went on with it. Dale was effusive in his praise of the horse afterwards, and thinks that he's one of his better 3-year-olds, if not that he's had in a while. And I think there's some truth to that. He's into Mischief, so they can seemingly do anything, including leap tall buildings in a single bound. So I'm expecting Cyclone Mischief to be, to be heard from in his next start. And he was yet another Kentucky Jockey Club alum that came back and at the very least duplicated their Kentucky Jockey Club form, if not improved it. If you're a Timeform US user, you're going to see a really substantial improvement from Cyclone Mischief, but we also saw improvements a little bit more fractional from Dennington and Hay Strike. So, good reason to think that that was one of the better 2-year-old races run towards the end of last year. And I'm eagerly awaiting Instant Coffee's first start as a 3-year-old. I'm looking forward to it. I guess it's going to be the Risen Star is what I understand right now. Brad Cox is a guy with an embarrassment of riches in that division as well. So, yeah, things are coming into focus a little bit more with some of these horses. And I like seeing 90 figs in January. That's always good. That leads you to believe that this is a pretty quick group of horses and that they'll probably get better as time goes by.
I think that all sounds right. And Cyclone Mischief, just, selfishly, as somebody who's had him on the show and just covers racing, always good to have Dale Romans on the Kentucky Derby trail. The quotes will keep on coming. You know that. And that's a fun one to follow. I would also keep an eye on Litigate, just pedigree terms. I mean, obviously has a lot to do to reverse the 5 lengths with the winner in this race, but you look at this pedigree, Blame out of a mine shaft dam. This was only the second career start. This horse is okay, and I think has a chance to just keep improving as the distances get longer. Obviously needs to get faster, but with only 2 starts under the girth, why can't that happen?
Well, I agree. I think he definitely has every right to move forward. And for that matter, I wouldn't give up on Mr. Ripple. This is a horse who got a 75 fig first time out, beat an ex-out winner, came back and got an 80, much closer to a very, very hot pace. He's a dialed in who went for 115,000. So there was reason to believe that he could run a little bit. So yeah, I think that at least 2 of the also rans in there are horses worthy of consideration. So I think this is going to end up being a pretty nice one, other than that yields some good subsequent graded stake performances.
You mentioned that Kentucky Jockey Club before, not the first year in a row that's looked like a key piece of 2-year-old form. Not sure, there's some obvious reasons. There's so much money to be run for the Kentucky breds there. The way horses are trained now, it's like at the right time of year, I think, for some of those big leaps up. But yeah, that's a race that it's probably a good one to go back and have the one's trip notes all brushed up for, because it feels like it could continue to be a key piece of form going forward.
That was an underrated cross promotion of you with the KTDF as well. That was really stout.
We don't have them in the row yet for this year, but we're hopeful.
Very smooth. Hey, look, if that's the lead in, that's a great start. No, all kidding aside, yeah. I mean, that's become a really important race. Smile Happy was the winner in 2021, and of course one of the vanquished horses that was in the money was White Avario, who came back and won the Florida Derby. Smile Happy came back and was in the money in the Risen Star and the Bluegrass. So yeah, it's just been a very, very nice race now for a number of years, and it used to get the billing as the race that would feature a horse that was backed because they had good Churchill form, and it's more than that now. It's a very good end of season race that I think at least for 2022 into 2023 is looking awfully productive again.
Let's back up and talk about Aqueduct on Saturday again and take a quick look at the rescheduled Queens County, just because law professor bet like he couldn't lose, made no mistake, winning by 7.5, comes back with a 98 Beyer speed figure. What is your prediction? Do you think they'll forge ahead if they can get an invite to the Pegasus, which I imagine they can? Do you think they would forge ahead with that? And how do you think he fits against a Cyberknife, say?
Yeah, I saw that murderer's row of horses lined up for it right now. I wouldn't be too scared. Obviously, Law Professor's got to run better than he did in the Breeders' Cup because, Cyberknife beat him pretty comfortably that day. And I would imagine Cyberknife will be set for a very good effort to close out his career before he goes to stud. But I'll tell you, Pete, Law Professor looked pretty darn good on Saturday. I don't know if maybe it was being home in New York. Maybe he's a bit of an Aqueduct lover, considering how well he had run in the Woodward. But, it's what you alluded to. They bet it like the race was over. He was just never more than 6-5 or so. He won very authoritatively. He showed more speed than he had in recent starts, which I thought was a really positive sign. Now, admittedly, trainer Rob Atris's barn is in a really good run right now, but I don't think that has as much to do with it. This is a really good horse that that could have a really nice home in the handicap division this year. Which, I mean, even the most conservative person would say that the ranks are very thin in that division. So he could be a welcome addition, and I thought that performance was rather compelling.
Yeah, there's really a lot to be figured out, especially domestically, with some of the big names that there are looking to be pointed to the Middle East. There's going to be some money around for a horse like that if he stays in good form.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the New Orleans series, the Oakland handicap. There's going to be no Taba in this country until probably Belmont Day, if that. Yeah. So there's a lot of races between now and June that you can run. And Law Professor's probably a horse that they're going to want to go longer than a mile or so anyway. So yeah, I think they should have a shot at a really good run with him. And I wouldn't be too worried about bringing him back in 3 weeks in the Pegasus. I'd certainly be willing to take a chance.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of prestige. I also wouldn't be shocked or terribly disappointed if the horse gives them any reason to back off a little bit. I mean, a race like the Razorback, right? I mean, wouldn't he look pretty darn good? I mean, he's super short in there, I would think, from this far out. I did want to chat. You joked about KTDF. I did want to joke though about another sponsor but mainly just because I thought it was an interesting bet and I thought it was worth talking about and reflecting on the coast to coast wagers that debuted last weekend. The Saturday one performed very, very well, especially given it was a mandatory payout day. And I kind of just wanted to vent. I was just very frustrated in ultimately leaving out a horse in Grazed My Heart, who it was one of those horses I look back after and I'm just like, this is something I can hear myself on the show making the case for the horse last time out, closing into blue time form US fractions. And, I had 1A and 1B and how hard is it to throw in an extra B line on a runner like that? I felt like I should have had it and I didn't. And I was irritated by that, but I thought all things considered it came off well. I did, as I mentioned on the Coast to Coast show with Jonathan, I did mention to the powers that be over there, like, hey, it would be wonderful, next time this comes up, if, the races 9 and 11 at Gulfstream could be flipped. So you get the maiden in the first leg. So we can see the betting on some of the first time starters. And it ended up being particularly relevant in there because you did have a 15-1 on the morning line go off at 9-2 that the horse with the great Coolmore pedigree that we talked about on the show, who ended up running second and surviving that narrow DQ. But I just thought this was funny. I think you'll appreciate this. That feedback was given by other people, some who maybe have been accused at points on this show of being basement dwellers. And rather than my constructive way of putting it, apparently one of the higher ups at first was told he was an incompetent idiot. So you can choose which communication style you like better, which one you think is maybe a little bit more likely to be productive. The hey, maybe you'd want to think about this. I'd love to, if you ever need help, I'd love to, offer my services or just to call people names. You pick.
Standing on a mountain and telling everybody how smart you are is always a tough exercise. It has to get exhausting at some point, but it's the fig jam approach, and everybody can figure out what I'm referring to. If you're that good at everything, then hey, nobody will have to ask you. But yeah, I mean, it would be nice to see those races be a little bit more open and clear in the sequence itself. I think the wager's fun. I think what dogged it a little bit on Sunday, Pete, honestly, is I don't really think that many people realized it was going to be both Saturday and Sunday. And Sunday was a slow handle day nationwide. But I think as people realize this is a weekly thing, basically 2 times a week thing, we'll see a lot more of it as we move forward. But then it would be advantageous for customers, obviously, again, to see the pools themselves. Fun bet. I mean, I'm in for any new bets with a low takeout and an interesting set of circumstances with good racing. And, those are 2 of the signals that are being paid attention to the most. I mean, they are the 2 biggest handling signals going in the country right now. So I don't blame the first group for wanting to do something that can combine a little bit of it. And so I look forward to it. I did bet it both days. I'm 0 for 2 so far as cashing, but I got a live, or I didn't get a live. I missed the 4th leg on Saturday and the 4th leg on Sunday, but it was a lot of fun. And I was a somewhat regular Tronic 5 player, but admittedly, this will be a little more interesting, a little more approachable, being simply from 2 tracks that I'm paying a lot more attention to.
Yeah, I think that's what has a lot of people excited. Maybe a lesson from Sunday was it started pretty darn early. So that
It did
first,
start early, yeah. Yeah.
I think it might help to have that first race, 3:30 or later I think there was like a 2:10 race. That's tricky. And that probably helps, even the marketing you can do on that day is useful. And I wonder, I held back our Sunday pod and dropped it Saturday. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe we need to get that Sunday pod out just so at least our people know about it, earlier too. That's a good point. Just at least until the pattern gets established. But yeah, looking at the listening numbers, I mean, obviously the Saturday show is going to be listened to a lot more, but it was like even more stark than what we used to do with the Gulfstream shows. Anyway, people don't care about how the sausage is made here at In the Money Media, but it's a good point that you make. Anything else you saw this weekend or burning in your mind that you want to chat about on this show, Nick? Eclipse Award thoughts, anything like that?
Nothing too significant on that. Looked like everybody had the finalists that you and Jay and I anticipated, talking about it a few weeks ago. So it's nice to see everybody casting their ballots, and I think there's a lot of harmony on some of the same divisions. But it'll be nice to see everybody crowned later in the month. So no, not terribly much. It was a good weekend of racing, and things start to pick up steam a little bit headed towards that last week in January with the Pegasus.
The one that keeps coming back to me, like I wake up in the night and I think maybe I should have put in Italian ahead of Regal Glory. I keep going back and forth on that. That to me was the head scratcher of all of them.
No wrong answer there. So no. I've also seen a lot of Cody's wish for sprinter support. And
as I said on the show with Jay, I just definitionally, I just can't do it.
Not when his definitive win was around 2 turns. It's just not. I just can't make that horse the sprint winner. I'd have been more inclined to give him a third vote as the champion older male. But a Forgo at 7 furlongs and the dirt mile, that's just not enough for me. So, and I'm a big Cody's Wish fan. I've been a Cody's Wish fan since his debut, since I cursed about missing my exacta in the Belmont contest there where I had him underneath Mahamel. And, little did we realize at that point that Mahamel was going to go on to be a claimer and Cody's Wish was going to be an Eclipse finalist. So pretty amazing.
And media awards wise, it was, it seems, we weren't up there this year, but a great assortment of talent, NBC getting rewarded for their consistently excellent work. Going to try to reach out and see if we can get maybe Randy Moss and Jerry Bailey as part of our Pegasus coverage in a few weeks. That would be very fun. And Tom Law, who always does such a good job, seeing him get rewarded, the HRRN team for their Breeders' Cup coverage. Lots of good stuff. If you haven't read about the media finalists, the media award winners, it's worth going and checking that out. Lots of good stuff. Though I'll feel a lot better. My award, the award we won last year, will be worth more when Steve Bick gets his. I'm not sure what we need to do to make that happen, but it's certainly overdue.
It is, and Steve's got a great relationship with the powers that be. So I was kind of hoping he'd get there, but one of these years, Steve's a credit to the industry, and the work that he does year in and year out is great. And I hope that it is duly recognized soon enough, because I can't think of anybody out there who's more deserving.
Oh, he does so much for players, and as we always say on this show, there's no faster way to become an insider than listening to his shows. The relationship he has with people, and just how much content do we provide a week, and then look at him out there producing, basically producing 15 hours or more himself. And maybe it's got to be a lifetime achievement award if just for some reason his particular style of broadcasting doesn't fit into what the judges are looking for or whatever. But something needs to give there, and hopefully sooner rather than later. That would be my only criticism as far as the stuff we saw nominated there.
I agree. Yeah, let's hope he'll have to settle for an Eagles Super Bowl this year.
Oh my God, they didn't look so hot on Sunday. I'll tell you that much. But I don't think they were taking it all that. When you have a quarterback who's only playing half speed, I suppose you have a built-in excuse. We'll talk more NFL. We'll talk more horse racing as the week goes on. Nick, we're going to have you back soon. We're going to wrap the YouTube video. If you're listening to the podcast, we've got a special guest who will be coming up right now.